I'm here today with Kay Tucker, who is a cellist, a musician, an educator, and has written books on how to play the cello for young learners called String Babies. And she also has a great wealth of experience um, from her teaching and her performing. And I would like to ask her a few questions today to do with repertoire. I'm hoping she can give us some insight to help other teachers and performers think about what they do and how they approach repertoire with their students. So over
Um,
to you, Kay.
I suppose with repertoire, you probably want to talk about what I use first with my very beginners. I think when I get a new student, I have to quickly work out what their background is, their experience. Obviously, age has something to do with it. If they're an absolute brand new beginner and they've never read a note of music in their lives, I start them on the String Babies track, which is the system that I developed for breaking down, I suppose, the traditional starting place for beginners. As you know, I started this originally with children of age between 3 and 6 in mind, but actually over the years I've used it with just musically inexperienced. I suppose talking about notation here and all the theoretical side of music, I've used them with beginners of all ages. So that's always where I start. And so the repertoire to begin with in the String Babies book is a very simple little tunes that I've written myself. They're very, very short, very condensed. And what is a very key part of this is that the students compose their own repertoire. Composition is really a huge part of the learning process. You know, if you compose your own melody using whatever tools you have at any given stage, you have ownership over the music. You're being creative. You're composing. You're sight reading, and all these, these skills and this enthusiasm is, I suppose, generated and encouraged. So that's where I start with beginners. Now, I have inherited students of differing ages. May have come to me, they've already been playing. So I have to try and suss out, by talking to them or letting them play to me, what their experience is, what they've learned, what they perceive that they want out of lessons. Some are very, very direct about this. It can be ranging from something as being just as being I know I have this problem, or I can't read music, or I struggle to make a nice sound, or I just want to enjoy playing music again, and I didn't enjoy it, previously. And so I really do try to tailor what repertoire I give. The one thing I tailor it to a pupil, I think the one thing I try to avoid is having a set list of pieces. Now, I did tend to experience it a little at music college, and where it seemed that my teacher at the time had a set number of study concertos that you had to do in a set. And it wasn't very helpful because we all were on this plan, so to speak. And I perceived that some of my peers were leaping ahead of me. And therefore, I judged myself. I thought, well, I can't be all that good then. And I started working, I thought, very hard, but I'm putting in hours of practice, but they were hours of poor practice. They didn't, I was doing repetition for repetition's sake, and it wasn't mindful practice. And it really was, a waste of time, but I didn't get any particular help at that time on how I could actually practice really better, apart from playing slowly, which, has a point, of course, absolutely.
It's very hard when there's a set list because then you do naturally compare yourself to other people. And we all come from different places and have different paces.
Yeah.
So this is a, from a teacher's point of view, it's a real challenge because you can't well, perhaps shouldn't have the same things for everybody. But then what do you do? Because sometimes there are things that you know are core that you hope everybody will do, and there are other times when you want to give students the freedom, and then sometimes you're stuck with lists. I
Mm.
know you have thoughts on all of those.
Yes, I think one thing I have accrued over the years is a huge bank of repertoire. I've got my music room is full of music, and from time to time with a pupil, I'll go and scout through something. I'll think, what do I think they'll enjoy? And I'll come down to a lesson with clutching a few pieces and saying, let's have a look at through this. Is there anything here that, appeals? Because, my priority is that the student really should enjoy what they're playing. I'm just reminded that when I was at infant school, they had the same kind of, system. You had a set repertoire of books. And of course, perceived myself, I was an August baby. So I was young in my year and I perceived myself as falling behind. And, with that, you judge yourself. So, with repertoire, you've got to give something, I think, that is tailored to that student as much as it can be. Listen to them. If they say, yeah, they want to do an exam or work towards an exam, definitely, support them on that route. But I wouldn't necessarily say to them, I'll choose the pieces for you. I just don't do that. I'll take their existing repertoire books that they may have, a collection of books, and see where, there are pieces that they could possibly use. And I usually leave it, the final choice, up to them. But I think of as being core really would be the technical work, the scales that support it. It does make me think, how important scales are.
Well, they're the building blocks. They're our
Yeah,
alphabet.
they are. They are. And I just remember adjudicating a festival of grade 80s, and they were fine starting off with most of their pieces, some of the students, but as soon as, their piece modulated into a more distant key, a more challenging key, their tuning suffered. And I still remember saying to them, do you practice E major? And you can see this sheepish little grin on their faces. I think they hopefully connected that. If they practice E major, they might actually find it less of a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's how I try, now to involve scales in the work. If we're learning a piece, I treat it as a big adventure. It's not just about piece, but there's so much you can learn about a piece, about its style, perhaps about its history, about, the rhythmic features, the keys, of course. And it's always my aim that the student should understand absolutely everything that's on the page. So that's really, very important in that. Yeah.
Now, with picking a program of pieces, I know you've had the opportunity to actually shape some of the repertoire lists for exam boards. And
Mm.
you've put some thought into that, obviously. And there are lots of teachers who rely on those for their core teaching material. And I'm sure you have thoughts on how the repertoire lists are not a curriculum. But also when putting together those lists, I know that you took great care in making a rounded experience for students and keeping them interested. Can you say
Mm.
something about how you were able to shape?
Particularly for the exam board, I had a blueprint in my mind. At this stage, say grade 1, I would expect a student to be able to play the scales of, one octave C, G, D, etc. By grade 2, they should have been learning extensions, and I'm talking left-hand technique, thinking about bows, simple slurring coming in at grade 1, things like that. So for each stage, I had a sort of, shall we say, a palette of criteria technically, Not so much musically, because I think music has always got to be played musically, if you know what I mean. Not I mean. So, but particularly technically, I wanted, above all, for the list to be enthusiastic. Now, how I came about doing this particular job, so this was selecting exam pieces for about 10 years for Trinity, and it was Trinity Guildhall to begin with. I sort of opened my mouth and put myself in a job. A friend of mine who was a local rep for Trinity said, well, have you thought of a Trinity exam syllabus? So she gave me a copy and I looked at it and I was bored. I thought it was way too narrow. About 4 pieces in each list. And so she said, well, why don't you write to the head office and tell them? So I did. And they said, would you like to, would you like to help in the selection procedure? What would you do? Well, prior to that, I had had some previous experience of being asked by the person who selected pieces for the Associate Board for my ideas. So I'd had a lot of experience in that, and I just brought that to it. Now, the when the new syllabus was being rejigged, and it was a major rejigging because at that time Trinity and Guildhall exam boards were coming together, I would be sent by all the publishers all their latest offerings, which was wonderful. So I had the very latest repertoire and I'd have a good study through it and think, is there anything there that I could use? And so I know that the syllabuses I set were the first ones to use cello time, joggers, runners, pieces by Kathy and David Blackwell. They were really, really appealing. And it was lovely over the years to get feedback from colleagues how much they liked, the syllabus. Their students enjoyed the pieces. I did bring that into it. It's been interesting because occasionally I would then find that some of the pieces I put into the syllabus appear in another exam syllabus, in a different board, and they'd be at a different grade. And I do remember on one occasion there was one piece that I had put in at grade 2. Technically, it would look as if it should be grade 1, but at the speed that it was meant to be played at, it was definitely not grade 1. And so it was in this other exam board at grade 2. And one of my cello teaching colleagues came and said, my student's struggling to play this at grade 1, but I noticed you put it at grade 2. And I said, yes. And the reason is that, you cannot play. It was a jig. You can't play it at that speed with the facility and technique you'll have at grade 1. So, I was able to bring, I suppose, my experience of teaching beginners to play heavily into those kind of decisions. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the sad thing was that a lot of great pieces that I had in my repertoire were out of print. And to actually get them back into print was a near impossible job because the publishers, it seems, basically, or they did then at least, just hold on to the pieces and don't always release them. So that was a great shame.
That's so frustrating.
Oh, hugely frustrating.
So when you teach people who do exams, because students inevitably, for various reasons, need to do these or want to do these,
Mm.
do you supplement with other material? And
Oh
what else
yeah.
do you do?
Oh my goodness, yes. My experience as a student was that I just did exam after exam, exam after exam, and nothing in between. So at each level and between each level, you've got to be building in awareness of style and technique, as well as the oral, as well as, the sight reading skills. You've got to be building those up to that next level so that when the exam comes, it's a comfortable experience. So in terms of repertoire, but the repertoire is just a vehicle because you're just bringing your own ideas onto it. I don't do studies for the sake of it, but we always do it for what we can learn out of it and how it's going to support perhaps the pieces that they might be learning.
Is this the way you treat yourself? Sometimes people say, "Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if I did what I said I do, in my own practice?" So is this how you play your own music and maintain your own level and choose pieces for you? Do you use the same methods as you teach?
I think so. Well, as you know, I spent quite a bit of the summer this year just relearning the proper studies for high school and cello playing, and I'm not playing them perfectly, but I'm a stretch of the imagination. But when I was at music college, this was our set workbook, and every week or every whenever, my teacher would give me a study, and then he'd sort of notch it off, tick it off when I'd done it. I realized that the greatest gift a teacher can give you is to teach you to be able to think for yourself, to be able to work things out for yourself, you know? I think to a degree, the thing that started to do that for me was to become a teacher.
Because you
So,
have to articulate things to other
yeah,
people.
and you have to work it out. You
Yes.
have to work it out. What I've really enjoyed is the challenge of thinking, how am I going to um, play this? How am I going to tackle this? Because some of it, as you can know, is pretty challenging. And I'm beginning to enjoy going back into repertoire. For instance, I never properly learnt Bach suites 5 and 6. And so over the past year or so, I've been doing the same thing with those, looking at those and other pieces of repertoire that I would have loved to have played, but never got round to. And that's sort of really feeding my enthusiasm. And for more advanced students, it's beginning to spill over into what I work with them as well. Yeah.
I think it's really important that you feed yourself. And
Mm,
also what you said about the teacher teaching you how to figure things out for yourself. It's the lifelong learning. That sounds like a cliche, oh, lifelong learning, but
yeah.
actually it's a great gift to be able to learn for yourself and to continue rather than to have the reliance on a teacher or a list and think, oh, I can do this, and then I'm stuck. What do I do when I'm
Mm,
finished? I'm just stuck or I'm done. I've had the students who've said, in other instruments at the universities, they said, a clarinet student once said, well, I did my grade 8 and then I stopped because I was
yeah.
done.
That's
I thought,
just
what
the
do you mean you're
beginning.
done?
It
Yeah.
is just the beginning. My experience as a student, I started at nearly 12 years of age. And when I was 14, or rising 14, I think, yeah, I did grades 2 and 3 a term apart. A year later, 4. A couple of months later, 5. Like a couple of terms later, 5. A year later, 6. 6 months after doing 6, I did 8. So I did nothing in between, no technique building, um, nothing. And what happened at grade 8? I hit a brick wall. I hit a big, major brick wall, and basically I had to, with another teacher, totally relearn absolutely everything, from bow hold to posture. I think you must never use exam list as the core repertoire. You'll find, as I found, that people who set these lists also have different opinions about, what should be in a grade, which might say something about their experience, as teachers themselves. You do have to support it with lots, and there's just so much out there. So,
You teach performance.
yes, to teach them to perform, I became an adjudicator, and then I realized what goes into performance, and it's not all about playing. So with performance, certainly as soon as you walk onto the performance platform, your performance has started. So when I'm preparing a student for a festival, and I have used festivals because they're brilliant. They can be really, really good, opportunities and platforms to, prepare a performance and to get some hopefully positive feedback. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's the aim. We talk about what's involved in a performance, about performance etiquette, about announcing your pieces even if you feel, very unsure about yourself, about that inner game, learning to ignore mistakes, that performance, it's one shot saloon. And what will be, and something may well go wrong, and you can't do a thing about it. And the important thing is to not broadcast it if you possibly can. As a teacher, I also listen to the student to see how they view themselves and their own abilities as a performer, and to try and encourage them and build confidence.
Do you create a performance scenario in a lesson? Do you separate things and say, now I'd like you to perform this?
I have done. I don't go into a different room. I sometimes sit because I'm an adjudicator myself. I say, right, I'm going to adjudicate you.
That's like having a red light on a record,
It
and
is. It
people.
is exactly so. It is exactly so. And then I give them the feedback. And it's a real privilege to be able to do that, because I've been doing it for donkey's years. Oddly enough, it was a way I prepared when I was in the process of becoming an adjudicator with the British and International Federation of Festivals. And I would say to my students, look, I need to be able to time myself to get thoughts down about your performance. Do you mind if we do a performance and I adjudicate you? And bless them, they were so willing. And then I'd give them feedback. And it was surprising how hard a lot of the youngsters were on themselves. But I did this, I did this and this and this. And I said, yeah, but with mistakes, if you don't broadcast it, people will forget it. That's the nature of live performance.
In those moments, they're open to that commentary and criticism, and it can be really important what they receive and how they receive it.
Yeah, it is. And it's not just, when you're adjudicating that it's a student, it's also the parents, it's also the teachers. And they do remember these. They do remember these experiences. Oh, I don't know, it must have been about 4 or 5 years ago. I was adjudicating in a place in Scotland. And there was a dad waiting sort of behind me for a moment to come and speak to me. And he came up clutching a sheet. And it was his daughter's adjudication sheet from the previous visit to the festival, which had probably been 6 or 7 years earlier. And he just wanted to thank me for what I'd said to her daughter, because as a result of that, he said she took the cello very seriously and she's now at the Royal College of Music. Result,
That's really nice.
it's really nice. I don't always get to see that, obviously,
Mm,
but now and again you do, and that's very rewarding. It
yeah.
makes you,
And it matters.
and kindness, doesn't cost anything. So
No, it doesn't, including, thank you for this time. It's been a real privilege to talk to you.
yeah,
About all these different insights into repertoire, your own teaching, your own practicing. I know it will be valuable to lots of people, and hopefully they'll send you a comment and say so.
yeah. And I would always say to students, just keep an eye out on what's out there. I think any music, as I found with String Babies, can be adapted really to work with any age. And treat your students as individuals. And it's really important that you make them feel as far as you can as valued and as special, and able to accept themselves for who they are. That's really, I think, important, and it's a wider mission in life.
That's brilliant. I
Yeah,
think that's a good note to end on.
yeah.
So thank you
Thanks,
so
Laura.
much.
It's
Hooray.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. See you.
Okay,
Have a
thank you.
great
Take
day.
care. Bye bye, love.
Bye.
Bye.